Next up, we do want to talk about the United Healthcare CEO shooting. Is once again thanking people for his mail on his new website that is being talked about with his defense team, making that possible, making the comments that was set up by his defense team. And we want to talk a little bit about that and a little bit more about the defense going forward for Luigi. So let's bring in our friend here of Live Now from Fox, Neama Rahmani, former federal prosecutor. Thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. And you know, Neama, we live now in this world where people, even if you are a defendant, they still want to make their cause known. And depending if it's a high-profile case like this one, they want to try to help out the suspect.
A level of support for Luigi Mangione that I've never seen for someone who's accused of murder. And obviously, there are folks who have very strong views about the health insurance industry. And I don't, of course, condone murder or violence at all. But this is the type of case that if you're prosecuting, you really have to worry about jury nullification. You talked about his defense fund. It's raised almost $500,000. And there's folks on social media that actually support what he has done. And we're talking about cold-blooded murder in broad daylight in the middle of New York. A very hard case to defend on the merits because there's so much evidence. There's video, there's DNA, there's ballistics, there's his manifesto. But again, when you have this type of support, you just need 1 out of 12 jurors to dig in their heels and vote to acquit, and you have a hung jury, which is a real risk in this case.
And Neama, what is it with these high-profile cases, more importantly, the high-profile suspects? We've seen it in the past, even with serial killers, where there is people in this country that want to reach out to them. They want to become buddies via the mail system, continue to try to talk to them. What is, do you think, the glorification of suspects when it comes to crime in this country?
You're absolutely right, Mike. There is that allure of a serial killer. Again, not saying I agree with it, but it is common. And you see that they have lots of fans. There are people that want to marry them. There are people that actually do marry them. And I don't know if it's the bad boy or here you have someone who's admittedly young, he's handsome, he's wealthy, he's smart, now he's famous. So you really check all the boxes. Again, not saying I support it, but this is something that is the reality when you have someone like this. It's a high profile murderer, it's a serial killer, and when the vast majority of the public says, I want nothing to do with this person, they do attract a lot of fans. And if you're prosecuting this case, you don't want any of the fans on the jury. I do think the state made one significant mistake in this case, in that they charged Luigi Mangione with terrorism. And the reason that that's important, Mike, is terrorism requires one of two things: the intent to intimidate the public or influence the government. And all of a sudden, you start getting into why Mangione did this. And all those reasons, all that evidence is coming out now, at least in the state case. If I'm prosecuting this case, I want to keep all that out. Doesn't really matter why he did it, right? But when you charge terrorism, it all comes in. So all that evidence and all that dislike of the health insurance industry and prior authorizations and denials, and we saw what was on those shell casings, right? Deny, defend, depose. All that evidence is coming out now.
And Neama, you made a really good point. I want to touch upon that again, where you talked about the prosecutor's got to be careful that they don't have Luigi's super fan that comes on into the jury there. So if there is a fan of Luigi, and how do they, of course, if somebody wants to be there on that jury, they're going to try to do everything and say everything so that they could be on the jury. And then once they're in there, then things can really happen in the favor there of Luigi. So how does prosecutors try to weed that out, or what do they even look for when it comes to thinking that this person might have sympathies towards the suspect?
Mike, you touched upon it. They're called stealth jurors. And the reason I really emphasize this is there are surveys that have been conducted about this case, and more than 10% of people approve of what Luigi Mangione did. Well, that 10% number is key because 1 out of 12 jurors, it's 8%. So if one of those jurors makes their way onto the panel, then they can really change the trajectory of this case. It doesn't matter what evidence you put before them, they might justify this. So what prosecutors need to do is focus on jury selection and make sure that those jurors, they're identified and they're weeded out. So the way jury selection works in any case, state or federal, first the judge will ask questions and the judge will dismiss people who the judge believes can't be fair and impartial. But then the lawyers get to ask questions. And for those of us who have served on a jury, then the lawyers get to exercise strikes. And those types of strikes, they can be used for any reasons, as long as they're not discriminatory, race, religion, sex, and so forth. So if you're the state, you really need to exercise those strikes surgically to make sure that anyone that may have any sympathy, who maybe has suffered or had a family member suffer because of a health insurance company, those jurors are removed from the panel because otherwise you're going to have a big problem here.
And let's talk about the defense there for Luigi. So, what is the defense really going to be centered in for his defense team when you have the suspect who not only is accused of the crime, but he's on video? So, what are the ways that a defense team can try to navigate these what seems to be rough waters?
Very rough. And this is an open and shut case if you take the sympathy factor aside. Like you said, there's the video, right? There's his manifesto that really identifies the motive, right? You have his DNA on the water bottle near the scene. You have the ballistics that match that ghost gun, that 3D gun without a serial number. And, you have the path that he took from Georgia and the path that he took to Pennsylvania. You have the firearm that was on his person when he was arrested. So, really strong case in terms of the evidence that you have. And it's not the type of case that you're going to be able to argue, it wasn't me, or I didn't mean to do it. This wasn't premeditated. This was unintentional. This was an accident. You're not going to be able to argue self defense here when you shoot someone in cold blood in the middle of the street. So you don't have the typical defenses that you have. You'd have to argue for some sort of conspiracy theory that he was set up. But I think really the way that the defense is going to go in a case like this is to argue that sympathy factor. Even though it's not appropriate, it's not really supposed to come in. I think that's the best chance that they have here.
And lastly, Neema, in relation here to these people that are donating to the defendant, is there any way for both really prosecutors and the defense, once they're looking at possible jurors, are they able to see, okay, did maybe this possible juror ever donate? I mean, is there a way for them to look at that, or are they just taking it at the person's word?
Well, there's two things they're going to do. They're going to identify everyone who has donated if they provided their name. And they're going to cross-reference that with a pool of potential jurors. But as you know, with a GoFundMe or whatever, you can donate anonymously and you can donate under another name. So they're also going to ask the jurors under oath, under penalty of perjury, if they have made any donations, if they posted on social media about this case in support or against Luigi Mangione, if they've showed up to protest or, to give encouragement, whether it's in Pennsylvania or in New York for this defendant. Those are the exact types of questions that you're going to need to ask during voir dire or jury selection.
There we go. Neama Rahmani, thanks so much. Definitely interesting case and really interesting times that we all live in right now. So thanks so much for all of the insight. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Talk soon.
Take care. Yes.